Imagine you are sitting in a packed, pitch black movie theater. The air is, it's practically vibrating with tension.
Yeah, that total pin drop silence.
Exactly. For 2 hours, you've just been gripping the armrests. You are entirely consumed by this relentlessly tense, bloody game of cat and mouse across the Texas desert.
Just waiting for that massive payoff.
Right. You are waiting for the final showdown, the climax, the moment where the old, weary sheriff finally catches the unstoppable killer. Or, at least uncovers some profound truth that makes sense of all the carnage.
But that is not what happens.
No, not at all. Instead, the sheriff is just sitting at his kitchen table. He's recounting a couple of confusing dreams about his father to his wife. He pauses. The screen violently cuts to black, and then the credits roll.
And the immediate reaction in that room is almost never awe. It's visceral betrayal.
Betrayal is the perfect word for it. People groan. They literally throw their hands up in the air.
Yeah, you blink against the sudden harsh lighting of the theater.
And you hear the person behind you mutter, completely exasperated, like, "That's it, what just happened?" Which is such a universal experience with this film. It really is. And then inevitably, once you're out in the parking lot, someone drops the most common, tired cliche in all of pop culture. Well, the book was better.
Ugh, right.
Yeah.
Which is such a limiting framework. We have this culturally ingrained habit of treating a novel and its film adaptation like competitors.
Like a zero-sum game.
Exactly. There's this rigid hierarchy where the original text sits untouched on a pedestal. And the film is viewed as nothing more than a flawed, compromised shadow desperately trying to measure up.
It's safe, it's familiar, and frankly, it is a completely boring way to look at art.
Totally boring.
But what happens when you step into the world of author Cormac McCarthy and directors Joel and Ethan Coen? Suddenly, that entire competitive mindset shatters.
Because you aren't looking at a race where one medium wins and the other loses.
No, you are looking at a bizarre, hidden, incredibly complex conversation taking place across two entirely different languages of storytelling.
It's a symbiotic dialogue. When you watch the Coens adaptation, you aren't just watching a movie trying to mimic a book.
Right.
You are watching the cinematic form itself interrogate the written word, and vice versa.
So, welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to completely abandon that the book was better instinct.
We are tossing it out the window.
We really are. We are going to explore the dark, terrifying, and deeply philosophical conversation between Cormac McCarthy's 2005 novel No Country for Old Men and the Coen brothers' 2007 cinematic masterpiece.
And we have some incredible sources to guide us through this.
Yes, we are pulling from a fascinating stack of material, specifically an anthology of scholarly essays titled No Country for Old Men, From Novel to Film.
This collection was edited by Linnea Chapman King, Rick Wallach, and Jim Welsh.
Right, and we will be focusing heavily on the front matter, King's preface, Rick Wallach's brilliant introduction on intertextuality, and an incredibly insightful excerpt from Linda Woodson about determinism and the borderlands.
A lot of ground to cover.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this. Because to actually understand how this book and this movie are talking to each other, we have to start with that feeling of betrayal in the movie theater.
The infamous cut to black.
Yeah. If we want to grasp the sheer gravity of what McCarthy and the Coens pulled off, we have to examine the profound disconnect between how this film was critically celebrated and how everyday audiences reacted.
Because on paper, the Coen brothers film was an absolute juggernaut. It dominated the Academy Award.
Oh, totally dominated.
It took home Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Adapted Screenplay. Critics heralded it as an instant American classic. But the mainstream audience...
Their reaction was wildly polarized. Polarized might actually be an understatement.
I think so, yeah.
In her preface to the anthology, Linnea Chapman King specifically notes this phenomenon. She watched the film twice during its initial theatrical run.
And both times, the moment Tommy Lee Jones finishes that final meandering monologue and the screen goes dark, the theater erupted into a stunned, incredibly uncomfortable silence.
Just dead silence, followed immediately by audible hostility. People genuinely felt robbed.
Which, to be fair, is a reaction the Coen brothers have been cultivating for decades.
Oh, absolutely.
If you look at their filmography, they consistently evoke confusion, disappointment, and sometimes outright disgust from mainstream viewers. And we have to ask why.
Well, consider how we, as an audience, are conditioned to consume stories. Modern mainstream cinema operates on a very specific contract.
Right, you buy a ticket, you invest your emotions, and in return, the filmmaker promises to package the narrative tidily.
They promise resolution. The bad guy is punished. Or at least the hero learns a valuable lesson that restores order to their universe.
But going into a Coen Brothers movie expecting a standard Hollywood thriller is like buying a ticket for a roller coaster. But halfway through the ride, the tracks just end.
The car stops in a dark room, and suddenly you realize it's an escape room. Nobody's coming to let you out.
That is the perfect analogy.
You have to figure out what it means yourself, using whatever fragments are scattered around you. They absolutely refuse to hold your hand.
And that shift in agency really upsets people. Mainstream media tends to enable this audience frustration rather than challenge it.
The source material highlights this, right? How reviewers treat their films.
Yeah, mainstream reviewers frequently trivialize the Coens' work when it doesn't conform to that roller coaster track. They accuse them of cinematic excesses.
Or they claim the directors have a coldness, like a sociopathic detachment from their own characters.
And Joel and Ethan Coen just lean into this. They famously refuse to explain their movies.
They give these deadpan, almost parody interviews where they play clueless, which only infuriates the people who are desperately searching for the key to unlock the movie's meaning.
But while the mainstream audience was throwing their hands up, the academic world was having a massive awakening. It just took a specific moment to ignite.
King points out that despite the Oscars, deep academic criticism of the Coens was strangely sparse for a while. That all changed at a rather unassuming gathering.
The 2008 Popular Culture Forum in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Right. It was originally slated to be a standard, maybe modestly attended analysis of the Coen brothers films.
But an unprecedented number of Cormac McCarthy scholars descended on this forum, alongside film theorists, sociologists, and literature academics.
Suddenly, this movie that left Friday night theatergoers groaning what happened was being subjected to the most intense, multidisciplinary dissection imaginable.
The sources mentioned they were analyzing it through the lens of post-9/11 anxiety.
And as a deconstruction of classic Western mythology, as an exploration of gender dynamics.
Even as a geographic study of the U.S.-Mexico border. They even spent time analyzing the social codes baked into the characters' haircuts.
Which, I mean, if you have ever laid eyes on Javier Bardem's terrifying pageboy Bob as Anton Chigurh, you know is a completely valid area of academic study.
Oh, 100% valid. That haircut is iconic.
But here's my major hang-up. Why is there such a chasm here? Why does a mainstream audience see a lack of an ending as a failure of storytelling, while these brilliant scholars look at the exact same void and call it a masterclass in philosophical allegory?
It is a great question.
Like, why does confusing the audience make it better art?
To bridge that chasm, we have to look at the underlying purpose of art itself. Dennis Rothermel, one of the scholars featured in the anthology, approaches this exact disconnect.
And he brings in a philosopher to explain it, right?
Yes, he totals to the 19th century philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer believed that the human experience is driven by a restless, endless, and ultimately irrational striving.
What he called the will.
Exactly. For Schopenhauer, most of life is suffering, driven by this constant wanting.
So a pretty bleak guy.
Very bleak, undoubtedly. But Schopenhauer argued that the highest function of great art is not to entertain us or distract us from that bleakness.
So what is it supposed to do?
The function of great art is to force us to confront it. If a film gives you a neat, satisfying ending where the hero triumphs and order is restored, the film does all the philosophical heavy lifting for you.
It pacifies you.
Exactly. You consume this story, your brain gets a hit of dopamine, you feel artificially satisfied, and you go back to your life without questioning anything.
You essentially use the movie as an anesthetic.
Precisely the opposite of Schopenhauer's ideal. By refusing to offer a tidy conclusion, the Coen brothers and Cormac McCarthy strip away that anesthetic.
They thrust the viewer into the exact same disorienting, terrifying position as Sheriff Bell.
Yes. When the screen cuts to black, you are forced to search for what is important in the narrative, because the directors refuse to highlight it for you.
And searching for meaning in an unresolved narrative is essentially practice for searching for meaning in an unresolved, chaotic life.
Exactly. The refusal to wrap things up isn't a mistake in the editing room. The frustration you feel is the point of the art.
You are forced to sit in the void and deal with the discomfort. And what is truly wild to me is that this incredibly frustrating avant-garde cinematic experience was adapted from a novel that itself operates under a totally bizarre hybrid structure.
Oh, the structure of the book is fascinating.
Right. When we talk about No Country for Old Men, we aren't even really talking about a traditional novel to begin with.
Far from it. In Rick Wallach's deep dive introduction, he reveals the fascinating origin of the text. No Country for Old Men did not begin its life as a book.
Sometime in the 1980s, Cormac McCarthy originally wrote it as a screenplay.
Yeah, and it just sat around for over a decade.
Ugh.
He eventually returned to the manuscript, dismantled it, and rewrote it as a novel, which hit the shelves in 2005.
And then, in a strange twist of fate, the Coen brothers almost immediately picked it up and reverse-engineered it back into a script for the 2007 film.
So the DNA of the story is inherently cinematic. It was born as a movie, disguised itself as a book, and then became a movie again.
And people love to say that about McCarthy's work. You always hear critics say, oh, his prose is so cinematic.
But it's easy to just assume that means he writes pretty descriptions of sunsets.
Exactly. Wallach actually breaks down the mechanics of why McCarthy's writing feels like a movie, and it is deeply psychological.
Wallach pulls an example to prove this, not from No Country, but from McCarthy's 1985 magnum opus, Blood Meridian.
And it is a vital comparison to understand the mechanics of how we read.
In Blood Meridian, McCarthy describes a group of riders moving across the barren, dry gravel of the desert Badlands at night. But he doesn't use desert terminology.
He deliberately infects the description with nautical terms. He describes the gravel banks as reefs.
He writes about the men traveling under a cape of wild mountains. He refers to the earth beneath them as snow blue ground.
Wait, I need to pause here because that is fascinating. Why nautical? If I'm reading a book about cowboys in a bone-dry desert, how does throwing in words like reefs and capes make it cinematic?
That's a great question.
Wouldn't that just confuse the reader's brain?
Actually, it creates a specific type of cognitive dissonance that bypasses your logical brain and targets your subconscious. Think about the psychological weight of the ocean.
Okay, vast, scary.
Exactly. The ocean induces a sense of profound agoraphobia. It is unfathomable, and it possesses hidden dangers beneath the surface, which is exactly what a reef implies.
A reef is something unseen that tears the bottom out of your vessel.
So by using the word reef to describe a pile of dry gravel, McCarthy is smuggling the terrifying, isolating emotions we associate with the deep ocean into a scene about a desert.
You feel the smallness and vulnerability of the characters because your brain is quietly processing the terrifying scale of the sea, even while your conscious mind is reading about dust and rocks.
That is what we mean by cinematic writing. He is acting like a film director manipulating depth of field or lighting to make you feel a certain way, but he is doing it purely with syntax and vocabulary.
He is hacking the reader's imagination. And this leads into a really dense but crucial structural theory about how we actually consume stories in different mediums.
Wallach brings in the Polish philosopher Roman Ingarden to explain this.
Right. Ingarden came up with a way to distinguish the psychological difference between sitting in a theater watching a play and sitting alone reading a book.
He splits the text of a play into two distinct categories, the hop text and the Niven text.
Let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. To simplify Ingarden's framework, the hop text is the primary text. It is the dialogue.
Right, the words, the characters actually speak to one another out loud.
And the Niven text is the ancillary text. It is the stage directions, the setting descriptions, the notes on how a character should move or emote.
That is the crucial distinction. So if you go to Broadway and watch a play, you are only ever exposed to the hop text. You hear the actors yelling at each other.
But I never hear the Niven text. Nobody walks on stage and announces he crosses the room angrily and slams his fist on the oak table. I just see the actor do it.
Exactly. When you watch a play or a film, you're witnessing the result of the Niven text. The synthesis has already been done for you by the director and the actors.
You are a passive receiver of the final visual product.
But a reader of a novel or a script is forced into an entirely different psychological posture. A reader has to actively consume both the hop text and the Niven text simultaneously.
And then synthesize them in their own mind to construct the dramatic reality.
Right. The reader receives the information as discontinuous fragments, a line of dialogue, followed by a description of a shadow, followed by another line of dialogue.
And the reader's brain has to impose a fluid, three-dimensional order onto those fragments. which takes a tremendous amount of mental energy.
And McCarthy knows this.
Yeah.
He constantly messes with the reader's ability to do it. Wallach points out that throughout McCarthy's work, especially in the Border trilogy, he loves to use theatrical metaphors.
Plays, carnivals, operas, to highlight how bad humans are at interpreting the world around them.
There is a perfect example from his novel The Crossing. The main character, Billy Parham, ends up watching a traveling performance of the Italian opera I Pagliacci.
Billy is the ultimate baffled spectator. He doesn't understand Italian, and he certainly doesn't understand the stylistic conventions of 19th century opera.
He sits there watching the actors weep and sing, and because he lacks the framework, he assumes the opera company is just dramatically recounting actual, literal adventures from their own lives.
And the best part is how he interprets the clown. The famous clown in I Pagliacci comes out in his full theatrical makeup, and Billy, a kid from the rugged frontier, looks at him and completely misinterprets the visual data.
Yes, he assumes the clown is wearing war paint.
War paint.
Billy takes the visual cue completely out of context because he doesn't understand the hidden rules of the performance. He doesn't understand the Niebuhr text of the opera.
By including scenes like this, McCarthy is employing what theorists call a radical model of storytelling. He is holding up a mirror to the reader.
He refuses to let you sink comfortably into the illusion of the story. By constantly reminding you of the theatricality of the world, McCarthy draws your attention to the fact that you, the reader, are currently consuming a constructed narrative.
He forces you to look at the scaffolding. Okay, I have to push back here, though.
Go ahead.
This is all brilliant literary theory. But if McCarthy's writing is inherently a screenplay, if it has this embedded cinematic DNA that hacks our brains, why are his books so notoriously difficult to turn into good movies?
It's a fair point.
Because No Country wasn't the first attempt. The anthology explicitly mentions Billy Bob Thornton's adaptation of All the Pretty Horses in the year 2000.
Right, that was a huge production.
It had a massive budget, it had Matt Damon at the height of his fame, and it failed spectacularly. Wallach even references the legendary, brutal post-production battles between Thornton and the studio Miramax.
They essentially butchered the film in the editing room.
Exactly. So if the blueprint of McCarthy's writing is already a movie, what makes the Coen brothers' adaptation of No Country a masterpiece while the others crashed and burned?
Because the mistake most filmmakers make is believing that adaptation is merely about translating visual descriptions. They think if they just point a camera at a beautiful desert cape and have actors recite the dialogue, they have captured the book.
But they haven't.
No, they have missed the ideology. To understand why the Coens succeeded, Wallach introduces us to the French film theorist Jean-Louis Baudry and his concept of the cinematic apparatus.
The apparatus. That sounds incredibly clinical. What does Baudry mean by that?
Baudry argued that in cinema, ideology isn't just found in the plot of the movie or the dialogue the characters speak. The ideology is physically baked into the machinery of how a film is made and viewed.
Like the literal equipment.
Yes, think about the entire setup. The camera lens, the decisions made in the editing room, the projector, and crucially, the physical reality of the spectator.
So when you watch a film, you are sitting immobile in a dark room. You cannot change the perspective.
Your eye is forced to look exactly where the director points the camera.
The medium itself is the message. The camera isn't a neutral observer. It has an opinion. It exerts control over me.
Absolutely. The apparatus of cinema inherently creates an ideological position of dominance and passivity. The director dominates. The viewer is passive.
And the Coen brothers understood this deeply.
They didn't just try to film McCarthy's pretty landscapes. They weaponized the apparatus of the camera to perfectly translate the central, terrifying thematic tension of No Country for Old Men.
Which is the evolution of pure evil and the inescapable nature of determinism.
Exactly.
But if the camera forces an ideology onto the viewer, what happens when that camera is pointed at a character who is entirely devoid of humanity?
It creates a fascinating problem.
How does a visual medium capture a void? Because that is essentially what we are dealing with when we talk about Anton Chigurh.
Yes, we cannot talk about this story without talking about Javier Bardem's legendary, terrifying portrayal of this cartel hitman.
But to truly understand what Chigurh represents on the page, Wallach compares him to the gold standard of literary evil. McCarthy's previous ultimate villain, Judge Holden from Blood Meridian.
It is the essential comparison for understanding McCarthy's worldview. When No Country was published, many critics lazily assumed Chigurh was just a modern-day rehash of Judge Holden.
Because there are both seemingly immortal, unstoppable agents of violence.
Right, but Wallach astutely points out that Chigurh is not Holden's equal. Chigurh is a degraded Bronze Age simulacrum of the judge.
Bronze Age simulacrum. Let's break that down. In classical Greek mythology, human history is divided into ages.
You have the Golden Age, which is the era of gods, perfection, and pure philosophy.
And then things degrade over time until you reach the Bronze Age, which is a diminished, crude, rougher echo of that former glory.
Exactly the dynamic here. Judge Holden is a creature of the Golden Age of violence. He is expansive, he is highly educated, he is terrifyingly theatrical.
He delivers these massive, parabolic speeches about theology, geology, and history. He views the chaos of the universe through a deeply philosophical lens.
Yes, describing human existence as a hat trick in a medicine show, a fevered dream, a trance bepopulate with chimeras. He embodies the philosophy of war.
But Chigurh doesn't do that. Chigurh operates in an age of ideology, not philosophy. And there's a massive difference between the two.
A profound difference. A philosopher questions the universe. An ideologue simply enforces a rigid set of rules upon it.
Chigurh does not theorize. His pronouncements are spare, rigid, and entirely devoid of intellectual curiosity.
They are simply declarations punctuated by violence. Consider the scene near the end where Carla Jean, the wife of the man Chigurh has been hunting, pleads for her life.
She asks him to make a choice, to make an exception, and spare her.
And Chigurh doesn't give a grand speech about the nature of mercy. He simply replies, I have only one way to live. It doesn't allow for special cases.
It is the ultimate statement of ideological rigidity. He isn't a god passing judgment. He is just a machine executing a string of code.
And you can see this shift from the grand philosophy of Holden to the terrifying, crude ideology of Chigurh perfectly in how both characters handle the concept of chance.
Both villains force ordinary people to gamble for their lives. In Blood Meridian, the judge uses a deck of cards.
Yes, the judge uses a card game where the loser is annihilated. And he uses the mechanics of that game to philosophize about the cosmos.
He waxes poetic about how two men wagering their lives on a turn of the card means that the whole universe for such a player has labored clanking to this moment.
He uses the complex, multivariable nature of a deck of cards to justify his grand theory of war.
But what does Chigurh use? He doesn't use a 52-card deck with endless permutations. He uses a coin, a binary, heads or tails.
The famous agonizing scene at the Texaco gas station with the bewildered proprietor.
Chigurh doesn't pontificate about the universe. He just points to the pure, terrifying, inescapable determinism of this little metal disc.
It's 1958. It's been traveling 22 years to get here. And now it's here, and I'm here. You stand to win everything.
The elaborate choreography and intellectual baffles of the judge's card game are stripped away. What remains is the spare, gritty, unyielding reality of the coin.
It is physics. It is gravity and momentum. It is the ultimate rejection of human agency.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because as much as Chigurh is this cold, almost robotic embodiment of fate on the page, the moment you put him on a movie screen, the cinematic apparatus we talked about earlier does something incredibly strange to him.
Wallach points out that pop cinema has this inherent, almost unavoidable habit of glamorizing villains. He uses this brilliant analogy of sports mania heroism.
It's a deeply uncomfortable truth about how we watch movies, isn't it?
It is. Wallach argues that it is nearly impossible for Hollywood to show a character surviving deadly situations, enduring massive physical trauma, and outwitting everyone around them without seducing the audience into admiring them.
Think about what Chigurh goes through in the film. He gets shot in the leg with a shotgun. He gets into a horrific, bone-shattering car crash.
He has to break into a pharmacy, steal supplies, and perform gruesome surgery on himself in a dingy motel room.
And he just keeps going. He never stops. And as an audience sitting in the dark theater, we kind of respect it.
It directly mirrors the American obsession with the star athlete playing hurt.
Right. We venerate the quarterback who stays in the game with a cracked rib. And the camera weirdly applies that exact same reverence to a psychopathic cartel hitman.
The lens of the camera magnifies the human form. It inflates the action. When you watch Chigurh methodically stitch his own leg, the extreme close-ups, the sound design of the needle pulling through flesh, it creates an intimacy.
And an awe for his sheer competence.
Exactly. The cinematic apparatus, what Wallach refers to as kitsch culture, subverts its own ability to deglamorize crime. The medium itself is so powerful that it makes survival, no matter how brutal, look heroic.
So does the camera inherently force us to root for the bad guy just because he's good at his job? Because there is a massive difference here between the novel and the film.
A very deliberate difference.
In the book, McCarthy makes sure to remind us that Chigurh is, at the end of the day, a thug working for a cartel. There is a scene where Chigurh recovers the satchel of stolen drug money and returns it to a cartel chief in a high-rise building.
It proves he is motivated by the same petty capitalist greed as everyone else.
But the Coen brothers explicitly chose to remove that scene from the movie. Why?
By removing that scene, the Coens intentionally purify Chigurh. They sever his ties to mundane greed. He is no longer just a hitman working for a paycheck.
The film elevates him into a pure, unadulterated inflection of the triumphant competitor. He becomes a grotesque, terrifying sort of sports hero.
And that editorial decision by the Coens acts as a lacerating commentary on our contemporary cultural values. We have developed an amoral, popular ethos that reveres survival, dominance, and sheer competence above all other human virtues.
Including empathy and morality. We respect the winner, even if the winner is a monster.
It is a horrifying realization.
And that realization is perfectly balanced by the other perspective in the story. Because McCarthy and the Coens don't just force us to watch Chigurh be an unstoppable force.
They force us to view the aftermath of his violence through the weary, incredibly limited, and deeply human eyes of Sheriff Ed Tom Bell.
This is where the structural genius of McCarthy's original novel truly shines, and how it challenges the reader.
The novel is bifurcated. It is split into two entirely distinct voices. On one hand, you have the flat, objective, highly visual third-person narrative that reads like a screenplay.
This voice describes the action in real time, the gunfights, the tracking, the escapes.
But interspersed with that, you have the retrospective, folksy, deeply introspective first-person monologues of Sheriff Bell.
And what is crucial to understand is that Bell's voice is not omniscient. Theorists call this a non-privileged narrative. Bell doesn't have a bird's-eye view of the plot.
He is constantly operating with a massive deficit of information. He can't see what the reader can see.
The theatrical theorist Manfred Pfister coined a term for this specific dynamic: discrepant awareness.
It refers to the gap between what the audience knows and what the characters within the story know.
Like Hitchcock's famous theory about the bomb under the table.
Exactly. If two people are talking about baseball and a bomb goes off, the audience is just surprised for 10 seconds.
But if the audience knows there is a bomb under the table and the characters don't, you generate 15 minutes of agonizing suspense. That is discrepant awareness.
But McCarthy and the Coens use it to generate a profound sense of melancholy and futility, rather than traditional thriller suspense.
Because in a standard police procedural, the detective is the tip of the spear. They uncover the clues, and they bring the audience along with them as they solve the mystery.
But in No Country, the third-person narrative, the camera, shows the audience exactly what happens in visceral, bloody detail.
And then, hours or days later, we have to endure watching Sheriff Bell arrive at the scene, staring helplessly at the bloodstains, trying desperately to piece together a narrative that we already know.
He is perpetually late to the tragedy. There is this incredibly dark, almost tragically funny moment that Wallach highlights to illustrate this.
Bell and his deputy, Wendell, finally arrive at the scene of the botched cartel drug deal out in the desert.
The audience has already seen the shootout. We know how it went down. But Bell just arrives to find rotting bodies, dead dogs, shot-up trucks, and millions of dollars worth of heroin.
Wendell looks at the absolute carnage and says, "It's a mess, ain't it, Sheriff?" He calls it a colossal goat fuck.
And Bell, staring at the ruin of the modern world, just replies, "If it ain't, it'll do till a mess gets here."
That line perfectly encapsulates Bell's total inability to comprehend or prevent the violence of the New World. He cannot stop it. He cannot even really investigate it.
All he can do is categorize the wreckage after the storm has passed.
And the tragic part is, Bell's moral compass is completely intact. He knows what is right and what is wrong. He is deeply offended by the violence.
His moral outrage is uncompromised, yes. But, as Wallach points out, having a strong moral compass doesn't win a gunfight.
Bell unknowingly cedes massive tactical and narrative ground to Chigurh's determinism because Bell is entirely reactive. He tells the reader right from the beginning that he has already given up.
In his opening monologue, reflecting on the new breed of criminal, he admits his defeatism. "I walked in front of those eyes once. I won't do it again."
He literally refers to Chigurh as a true and living prophet of destruction. Before the plot even truly gets underway, the sheriff has already decided that he will not put his soul at hazard to confront an evil he cannot understand.
Which brings us to what I think is the most mind-blowing, brilliant detail in Walt's entire analysis. It is the doorknob scene in the movie.
Oh man, this scene. If you want to understand how the Coen brothers translated the literary concept of discrepant awareness and Bell's defeated gaze into pure visual cinema, you have to look at this scene.
It is arguably one of the most masterful pieces of filmmaking in the 21st century. Let's set the stage. Bell goes to the El Paso motel room, where the protagonist, Llewellyn Moss, has just been murdered.
It is the dead of night. Bell draws his gun. As he approaches the door, he notices something terrifying. The lock cylinder has been completely blown out. It's just a hollow, dark hole.
And we, the audience, know exactly what makes that hole.
We have seen Chigurh use his captive bolt stunner, a slaughterhouse tool, to blow out locks for the entire movie. Bell stands out in the hallway, gun drawn, hesitating. He is terrified.
And then the Coen brothers do something extraordinary with the camera. They cut to the inside of the pitch-black motel room. Chigurh is standing there.
He is perfectly still. He leans down and looks through the hole where the lock used to be.
The audience sees an extreme close-up of the brass doorknob on the inside of the door, and what is reflected in the curved brass of that doorknob.
It's Bell. The audience sees Chigurh's reflection looking at Bell's reflection in the doorknob outside.
It is the ultimate subversion of cinematic spectatorship. Remember Baudry's apparatus? Usually the camera acts as the protagonist's eyes, giving the viewer a sense of agency, or at the very least it acts as an objective, neutral observer.
But in that specific moment, the camera is violently turned around. The apparatus forces us to gaze at the supposed hero of the story through the physical eyes of the killer.
The natural order of storytelling is entirely upended. Bell, the agent of the law, the man who is supposed to be doing the looking, the investigating, has suddenly become the subject of the killer's speculation.
You are literally forced to share the gaze of unstoppable evil, watching the good guy hesitate. The audience knows exactly what Chigurh is capable of.
We know Bell has absolutely no idea how close he is to instant death on the other side of that wood.
Bell is a completely passive cinematic subject in that moment. He is frozen. And in a terrifying way, he is in the exact same position as the audience sitting immobile in the theater.
He has no agency. We watch him push the door open, but the room is empty. Chigurh is gone. And the movie never explains how Chigurh escaped that room without being seen.
Bell doesn't know. We, the audience, don't know. The film reconstitutes the dichotomy of McCarthy's novel perfectly. It makes us share Bell's utter ignorance of how the world works, while simultaneously trapping us in Chigurh's deterministic, terrifying gaze.
It's deeply unsettling because it strips away our comfort. It makes Bell this incredibly poignant allegorical figure.
He isn't just a tired Texas sheriff. He represents the modern audience feeling completely overwhelmed by a chaotic, accelerating world that operates under brutal rules we no longer understand and certainly do not agree with.
And that transition from the abstract to the real world is so important. Because as fun as it is to talk about the cinematic gaze in French film theory, all of this is grounded in a very specific, gritty, material reality.
Why does this story take place on the Texas-Mexico border in 1980? What is McCarthy really trying to say about American society?
To answer that, we turn to Linda Woodson's essay in the anthology. She shifts the focus from the mechanics of storytelling to the thematic conflict between moral responsibility and determinism.
Woodson highlights that the borderlands in McCarthy's work are never just a picturesque, dusty backdrop for cowboys. The border is a literal and metaphorical battleground.
She quotes the scholar Gloria Anzaldúa, who famously described the border as an open wound, a place where enemies are kin to each other.
The violence in this story is horrific, and because Chigurh acts like this philosophical agent of fate, it is easy to view the bloodshed as some sort of random cosmic psychopathy.
But it isn't. The violence in No Country for Old Men is entirely fueled by an incredibly mundane reality. Drug lords engaged in brutal, mechanized power struggles over millions of dollars of heroin.
And that entire black market power struggle is fueled entirely by one thing, the appetite of the American consumer.
The demand for narcotics. And Sheriff Bell is acutely aware of this. While he might be confused by the sheer scale of the violence, he is not blind to its root cause.
He is the one who points the finger directly at the source, which is society itself. He has this profound realization where he says, we're been bought with our own money. There's always been narcotics, but people don't just up and decide to dope themselves for no reason, by the millions.
He is looking at the rotting bodies in the desert and realizing that they are just a symptom of a much larger systemic spiritual sickness. People are choosing to numb themselves.
Woodson's analysis argues that McCarthy's work functions as a dark homily. It is an allegorical critique of late-stage capitalism and the pervasive, creeping nihilism that accompanies it.
The characters in this story are entirely stripped of the romantic frontier myths that usually populate American Westerns. There are no noble cowboys riding into the sunset.
There are only relics left behind by an economy of violence, which gives profound meaning to the title of the book. No Country for Old Men isn't just a catchy phrase.
It is drawn directly from the opening line of the Irish poet W.B. Yeats's masterpiece, Sailing to Byzantium. The poem begins, "That is no country for old men, the young in one another's arms, birds in the trees."
It is a poem about an aging man who feels entirely alienated from a vital, sensual, violently alive, but ultimately mortal world.
The old man in the poem realizes he no longer belongs in the physical realm of the young, and he seeks the cold, immortal permanence of art instead.
Sheriff Bell is that aging man. He is a relic. He is standing in a bleak, blood-soaked country that has completely moved past his outdated, gentle moral code. The world belongs to the Chiggers now.
And this is where we have to sharply contrast McCarthy and the Coens' stark, unforgiving reality with the slick Hollywood thrillers that normally tackle the drug trade.
Wallach points to critically acclaimed films like Traffic or Pulp Fiction.
Those films, despite their artistic merits, still fundamentally capitalize on the lure of the illicit. They romanticize the stacks of cash, the sophisticated weaponry, the intoxicating thrill of the chase.
They make the underworld look cool.
Exactly.
So when we step back and look at the entire picture, what does this all mean? It feels like McCarthy and the Coens are doing something incredibly subversive to the people reading the book and sitting in the theater.
They absolutely are.
Bell is looking at the cartel violence on the border and asking, in despair, why millions of ordinary Americans want to numb themselves with drugs, why they are financing their own spiritual destruction.
But by making the movie so tense and then denying us the ending, aren't the authors also asking us why we are so desperate to consume hyper-violent, romanticized crime stories?
This raises an essential question, perhaps the most important question of this entire deep dive. Are we, the audience, complicit?
Think about our own consumption. We demand the thrill of the chase. We buy the tickets. We celebrate the violence when it is safely packaged as Friday night entertainment.
We want the visceral rush of watching Anton Chigurh operate with lethal efficiency. We are effectively funding the cinematic cartel of violence.
But then when the lights come up, just like Sheriff Bell, we mourn the loss of moral order in our actual society. We want the cheap thrill, but we are horrified by the philosophical consequences.
We want the roller coaster, but we throw a tantrum when the tracks run out, and we actually have to sit in the dark and think about what we just experienced.
Exactly that. The novel and the film operate in perfect tandem to expose this hypocrisy. They equivocate Bell's discourse. We know he is a defeatist. We know he is tired and outmatched, but he remains the only moral compass we have.
Literature, as Wallach argues, remains a vital vehicle for deglamorizing the cinematic ethos. The book provides the interiority, the weary, heartbreaking confession of the sheriff that undercuts the visual thrill of the gunfights.
And the film provides the sheer, undeniable, terrifying reality of the visual world that Bell is so afraid of. They aren't competing to see which medium is better.
They are perfectly complementary. The book shows us the human soul at hazard, struggling to make sense of the void. And the film shows us the void itself, the prophet of destruction, staring right back at us through the brass reflection of a doorknob.
It is a remarkable, unprecedented synthesis of mediums. We've journeyed from the stunned, frustrated theatergoers looking for a dopamine hit of resolution through the complex psychological mechanics of the cinematic apparatus.
And how ideology is baked into the very lens of a camera. We've explored how Anton Chigurh represents a terrifying, deterministic shift from grand philosophy to pure, violent ideology.
And how Sheriff Bell's compromised, defeated gaze forces us to confront our own passivity as an audience sitting in the dark.
And it all lands right back in the blood-soaked dirt of the borderlands, where the violence is fueled by our own money and our own insatiable desires, leaving us in a country that has completely outgrown its own moral myths.
So the next time you sit down to watch a film or open a book, I want you to stop and ask yourself, who is controlling the gaze?
Are you really seeing the whole picture, or are you just like Sheriff Ed Tom Bell, arriving late to the scene of a colossal mess, desperately trying to piece together a narrative that has already left you behind?
You have to interrogate the apparatus. You have to ask yourself why the camera is making you feel awe for a killer, or why the text is making you feel the weight of the ocean in a desert.
And that leaves us with one final lingering thought for you to mull over. We spent a lot of time today talking about how the cinematic lens inherently glamorizes the survivor.
How it forces us to respect competence, even if that survivor is a ruthless, psychopathic hitman like Anton Chigurh.
If the stories we consume, the movies, the shows, the media, constantly reward and elevate the ideology of survival and dominance at any cost, do they actively shape a more deterministic, less moral reality for us outside the theater?
It is something we all need to think about.
If we truly are what we watch, are we slowly, willingly turning our own world into No Country for Old Men?